Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. What's going on? I hope everybody's doing well. Welcome back to my basement. I'm Francisco Suarez, your host, and this is From Suarez Basement. Why is it called From Suarez Basement? Well, it makes sense, right? I started producing this show from the basement of my house a year and a half ago, if I remember correctly. When the pandemic hit, I was looking for finding ways to keep my students engaged, but more important, to keep them optimistic about their future career. So I started this podcast to create bridges between experts in the communication media and the arts, the students, faculty, and of course, you that are listening and watching our video or audio podcast. So thank you for being here. And like you can see, technology allows us now to really, if you work hard and you are persistent, you can make things happen. Look at us a year later and we keep kicking out, right? That is what it's all about. I want to also remind you that we have a new home in the internet. It's www.fsbasement.com. In this new home, you can find the entire library of our episodes in audio or in video, but also we have created really cool educational tools that you can use for your own education, plus a lot of cool other features that are there in www.fsbasement.com. Just go and visit us. Today, of course, like every 2 weeks, we have a fantastic guest waiting for us. She is behind the custom designs of one of my new favorite TV shows in Apple TV called S-E-E. The custom design is fantastic. The storyline is very, very interesting, and the acting is superb. So I will 100% recommend. She's also very well known and have been nominated 3 times to the Emmy Award for the Handmaid show in Hulu, of course, very famous show from Hulu. So I cannot wait to have this conversation with Natalie Bronfman, which is waiting for us to be able to have a really nice conversation with her. Thank you, WCNY PBS in Central New York, for your partnership. And of course, thank you, the viewers and the listeners that tune in every 2 weeks to, give us your company. And I hope this new episode from Suarez Basement is exactly what you're looking for. Let's start this new conversation with Natalie Bronfman, custom designer, right away. Here we go. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you. This is so exciting. So I want to go back to your childhood because I do always want to find that moment where you suddenly realize, I think custom design is something that I would like to do. Can we go back in time and tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and when did you realize that fashion and design, I understand that you were also involved in interior design, was something that you were passionate about?
Mm-hmm. Well, I grew up in Germany and in Toronto, mostly. But I also lived in New York and in Rome, but that was a little bit later on. I grew up in a family where the women were very, very good seamstresses. So I, right from the get-go, to make doll clothes, I was already learning how to sew. It was all by hand, but it was, I had the basics. I had the understanding of putting things together, constructed, that I cut, and so on. And I also really loved to sing. So I ended up wanting to be an opera singer. And I was good, but, I wasn't top-notch. And I didn't want to stay in the chorus. And I thought, how can I stay in this environment? And I thought, well, why don't I do the costumes instead? And I already knew how to paint and draw because that was also something we did in our family. And I started out actually doing the costumes probably in high school or grade school even. We were doing French plays, Molière and so on. And I would hunt around, see where I could get scrapped fabrics and cut up bed sheets and all of that. So
And I remember, what is about it? What is about? I can't tell you. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated with everything that have to do with visual storytelling and the business of make believe. The idea that you take something and you're going to make me believe that, that's real. That dress, that suit, that is real, and I'm fascinated about that. So, what is it about custom design at that time when you realize, I want to do this, that you are so fascinated about it?
Well, because I could pretend to be somebody else for a day or for a few hours. I could be the princess, or I could be the judge, or I could be whatever, the magician, or any of those things, the Joker and the court jester, and that's what was so fun about it, because I could pretend to be other people. And I guess that play acting, and I guess that goes along with being in the drama and the theater and opera and all of that. So it's
that's very cool. Yeah, well, your work, I mean, speaks louder than words. I mean, what you have created is amazing. It's really, really good.
Oh.
But I always want for the students to have kind of a dictionary definition of, if you could define by your own words and your own experience, what is a costume designer work? How you will try to summarize that?
My job is to be able to tell a story with the clothing that highlights also the actor's acting, but doesn't detract from it. So if you were to take just the shirt from the character, you could look at it and say, okay, this man came from this kind of society with this kind of economic background. He's been through this kind of trauma, perhaps, if that's the clothing looks like that. Or if you take a piece of armor, it'll tell a story. So all of these are pieces of the story. And I think that's the biggest job of the costume designers, to be able to have the clothes also tell the story, not just the actor.
Right. And that brings me to my next question, my next fascination about this puzzle called make-believe and it's costume design, set design. Everything needs to land in the perfect place to have a good show, which you have been working in amazing shows. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. But what is the relationship between character development and costume design?
It's huge. It's symbiotic. It's one and one together. Often when I meet the actors the first time, I have a discussion with how they are crafting their character and what is it they're going to do with their character and where are they going to take it in the arc of the story. A lot of that is psychology, and you have to understand a little bit about human behavior in terms of pay attention to how people behave when they're in certain states of mind. Are they depressed? Are they happy? Are they excitedly getting married, or are they they're not happily married, or have they lost a child? Or anyway, all of those things play on what they're wearing. You don't wear bright, happy colors when you're upset and depressed. There's certain people that only will wear black, for example, and you have to find out why. Are they hiding? Are they trying to blend in so that they can observe what's going around and that they're not standing out? So there's all these layers. And with the actor, once I find out where they're going with it, I will craft the clothing to fit their character. And it has to be something you don't really see when you look at the screen. You just know that they're wearing the clothes that belong to this character. You don't say, oh, look at that red shirt. You should be looking at the acting. So it's hand in hand, and you have to have a good conversation with the people.
Do you think you have become, because the relationship that you have between the characters, the actors, the costumes that you create, a little bit of a psychology of clothes? I mean, like, can you maybe be in the street and someone's like, maybe that person is having a little bit of a hard time today because what they're wearing?
Absolutely. I see that even with my crew sometimes. In the last show, I was with them for 2 years, and I could definitely tell where somebody was in their head. Were they happy, or they're having a rough time? You just got married, so you show up in bright orange and greens, and and then another lovely lady, she just started dressing in gray, and everything became really big, and she was having a very terrible time in life. So it's I could absolutely tell that now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very well. It's that mix between what fashion is and costume, right? I mean, we more or less also dress every morning depending of the character. I'm a professor, for example, so I don't go to work in a t-shirt. I put something a little more formal. Yeah. So my students take me more seriously. Right.
Well, absolutely. I mean, a uniform, it becomes a uniform. Even myself, when I go to work, I have a certain type of clothing I'll wear that I never wear when I'm not working. So it's a uniform, I want to say.
It's an expression. So you have been nominated to the Emmys for your amazing work in Handmaid Tales. And of course, we need to talk about the red cape, right? You have created something that is so iconic. What was the inspiration behind the costumes in Handmaid Tales, and how suddenly this amazing costume that we're going to talk about what do you feel when you see your costumes in Halloween, right? That will be quite excited. Yeah. But the red cape, how this happened?
Well, initially the costumes were sort of set. The clothing that the people wore in the Society of Gilead was already predetermined by Margaret Atwood in her book. So it was just up to us then as costume designers to give it its modern spin or the spin of the times. The red cape, I mean, it's when you look at a cape, typically when you wear a cape, you can hide your face, which the girls should not have had. They weren't supposed to be individualized. So they became just a sea of, baby carriers. They didn't have personalities or faces, or at least the Gilead didn't want to see them. The color itself is a symbol of fertility. Also, if they were ever to try and run and escape, you could find them in the woods because they're wearing a bright red cape. That's another thing. And then eventually, of course, the color changed into a subliminal anger and a seething fire in their souls. So it was nice to be able to play with that a little bit. And also, when you think about Little Red Riding Hood, for Gilead, this is my opinion, not selling Mrs. Atwood's, but there's a sense of juvenileness to it. Like there's young girls, young innocent girls, and that's what Gilead kept trying to push with these handmaids. So all of that, ball that all together, and that's how you get. I guess that's how the cape came about.
And how tell me a little bit about how the process of, especially with Handmaid's Tale, we're going to talk about C, which is now one of my favorite shows out there. But what was the process? You get hired, you get a script, and what happened next?
Well, you have discussions with obviously the showrunners, the writers, the producers, the director, very, very importantly. Sometimes the director of photography also has, stipulations like I cannot use this color or that color, or I present this is what I need, and then so we work together. And it just, in this case, because it was already initially preset from Ms. Atwood, it had to also have her approval and her stamp of approval of it because it is her story. So, and she's the original artist, let's say, of this fantasy tale, this terrible fantasy tale. So that's the process, basically. You get the script, then you do drawings, you have meetings, then you meet with the actors, you get their input, then you fine-tune the drawings and the designs, and then you basically build them. And all of this has approval process steps. So it's not like you just walk in and do whatever you feel like. It's a big company of ideas, let's say.
Are you able to keep some of those costumes? Meaning, like for Halloween, you're dressing in red cape?
No, they unfortunately all belong to Hulu.
Oh, well, what we can do, right? But the other question I have is functionalities of costume, because C, which we're going to talk about, is a series in Apple TV. Amazing story, amazing acting, and of course, production value is all there, right? It's a lot of action, it's a lot of fighting. And so as a costume designer, how you take in consideration functionality of a costume? Because again, the costume can be very pretty, but if the actor cannot move, especially in these scenes that you have all these fights, how that work and how you play with functionality in your work?
Well, that's a big process in research and design, so R&D, and essentially we do a lot of mock-ups. I work in half scale, so I build the exact costume in half scale in the original fabrics, materials, whether it's leather or metal or glass or whatever, and then we see if it works. Then we will make another mock-up in full scale. And actually, for example, when they're doing a fight sequence, I will give it either to the actor or the stunt person who is the stunt actor, and have them rehearse in it. Then they give me their notes and say, okay, I can't lift my arm because this pauldron is or it's hitting me in the neck, or it's the shoes hurt, or whatever. In the case of C, because it was a society that was, that nobody could see, the visors on the helmets, for example, of the Travantian army, they covered the eyes, but in reality, they couldn't fight not being able to see the guy that they're hitting with the stick in real life, because we would have had many injuries. So we had to create, we had over 30 different prototypes of visors that looked to us like they couldn't see through them, but they could actually see through them. Mm-hmm. So, for example, that's a big one that we had, and we did lots of research and design on that. And in some instances, we actually had to cut them out completely, and they would fill them in again with CGI because the sequences were too intense. Another thing that we worked on a lot was the temperature, because we were shooting in high summer and high winter. So we had minus 40 Celsius and we had plus 40 Celsius. So we had all complete ranges, and we had to come up with ways to keep actors either warm or cool, depending on what season we were shooting. So, or dry, or if they went into the water, we had to, incorporate dry suits underneath their clothing and make it look like they're not wearing dry suits. So it's all of that is, for example, with Jason's boots, we made all the footwear as well in season 2 and 3. And he had many versions of his footwear, ones for high winter, which had good grips and treads and that were warm, and other ones that were waterproof when he had to go through the water. So it's all, Or, for example, another big one is fire. Whenever there's fire, everything has to be fireproofed. And It has to be natural materials only. So no plastics, no polyester, no nylon, because we had to impregnate it with a saline solution that was a fire retardancy. So, so all of those things.
But you must have containers and containers and containers of costumes, right?
Yes, we do.
You're right.
We have about 3.
Wow. And you have to be super well organized. I mean, we need this for da-da-da, and you need to know how to find it. And, it must be a very detailed inventory.
Actually, last month, I had a costume that was shipped down to Los Angeles for a panel. And out of the 79 boxes, there's a map that I had, and they were asking for one specific costume, and I actually had to walk somebody through the trailer. I said, okay, on your left side, 3rd box in. And they're like, how do you, and I said, go deeper down, there's another box below that.
There we go. Do you have a system? I'm assuming you work with a team. How many?
Yeah, on C, it was such a big show, we had 57, which is huge. Huge. On Handmaids, I had, as a base crew, 12. And then we had people that we needed when we got bigger, busier, and then we would go back down to our 12. But on C, we consistently had 57 people.
Wow.
And then we would bring in more people when we needed. And one day we had 900 backgrounds. So we had 60 dailies. So 60 people that were not part of our team that we had to hire for that week just to help us.
Amazing. Are you normally in set when they're filming, or depend?
Half and half. So costume designer typically goes to set because when you're constantly having to build and keep it moving in the shop, you go to set when there are brand new costumes that nobody's ever seen before, first time that they're being filmed. So that's when you go. And in case there's any modifications, or all of a sudden director might say, I don't like this color, what else do you have? You got to come up with something. So, and that is the costume designer's responsibility, not the person on set typically, because that's a big burden for them to bear. Say they choose the wrong thing, and then it all doesn't work with the rest of the sequence, right? So,
tell me a little bit, and again for the viewers and for the listeners, C again is a show in Apple TV, 2nd season. Fantastic writing. Also a very interesting concept. I mean, it's an apocalyptic. After story of a society that is all blind, and it's a very good premise. How do you design to a blind society? What are those characteristics that the director and told you this is what we need?
Well, we have the other senses, and so I had to pull fabrics or leathers or create jewelry or things that you could either hear or smell or even taste or feel. So, for example, the queen, she has her bells when she rings them, and then she's coming down the hallway. Every character that of importance, especially in the palace, had a certain sound to them. They had a slighter, different tonality of jingles, and it was all found objects. So maybe there were chains that rattled, or they had little bells on the back, or they had, radio parts that would hit together and they would make a noise. The army had on their boots, the 2 different armies had 2 different noises on one of their boots only, so that when they marched, you could hear who's coming and how far away they were. So there was all of those little things that I had to play with. Everything has texture to it. It's all recycled things, let's say. In the Travantian market, we had sellers that had plastic doll pieces stuck on a vest, but when he moved, they made noise. So it's
it's fantastic. It's recycled because we're living in a time, apocalyptic time, where materials disappear and we need to start recycling. in order to create this fashion?
No, most of these, the premise of that was that these were items that did not disintegrate even 600 years from now. So, we even used tire pieces to make shoes. Plastic cutlery became jewelry. Radio, like anything metal doesn't disintegrate very quickly. So we would use car grills and use that as jewelry or pieces of a crown. Or, for example, I made one crown for the Queen. It didn't get onto camera, but it was made out of silverware, all the forks and knives. But it was such a heavy piece that we couldn't wear it because she couldn't move very well in it. So unfortunately, it's too bad because it was a magnificent piece. But it's that kind of a thing. It was all upcycling. In season 1, there was an entire town that was made out of plastic bottles that were crushed up into bricks. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's that kind of a thing. It's to show us that we're destroying the earth and this stuff is still around 600 years from now.
Do you have a specific time, do you think, for the show? Like, not that we have to have a specific time, but are we talking about 15 years from now, 100 years from now?
Oh, they were talking about 500, 600 from now.
Which is nothing.
Which is nothing really in time. No, it's not. It's and the thing is, the reason why the clothing looks the way a lot of people say, oh, it's medieval, and it's not medieval, because when humanity came out of the darkness of Byzantium, they went into the Iron Age, and of course we reverted back to basic stuff. So you had basic clothing, you had basic arms, you had basic shoes. So I kind of styled it against the Iron Age with a little bit of ancient Rome. And then I started digging into the other eras of throughout time. So that was a lot of fun. That was the best part.
That's awesome. That's very cool. And the question that I have, you're going to laugh with this one, but my husband and I, we watch the show. We're big fans. And we have a bet. I say that they are using some contact lenses that kind of impair the vision in order to help them to act. He's saying, no, you are wrong, dude. They're able to see. So are they using contact lenses that impair the vision in order to give them a little more, let's say, putting into character, or they really can see through the contact lenses?
There are no contact lenses whatsoever. There's nothing on their eyes. We have an advisor, Joe Strecce, who himself, he cannot see. Okay. And all of us, including myself, the camera guys, everybody who comes to work on the show has to go through blindness training.
Wow.
So in other words, we were blindfolded, and he had worked out a room, and we had to find our way around the room without seeing. And he showed us how to use the white cane. And also there was a mock setup kitchen, and we had to figure out without looking what it is we were touching. And so this is how he would train all of the actors as well. So there was a whole movement team that just focused on teaching people how to behave in terms of that way. Like, for example, whenever you heard a sound, you looked at them with your ears because you were hearing them as opposed to seeing them. So that's a big key, and when you ran your hand across a counter, you would go with the back of your hand to feel what it is that was on the counter as opposed to looking down at it. Like, so you could look straight ahead, but you feel it with the back of your hand. So
the colors that we see in the eyes are then put through a special effects or
CGI, CGI.
Oh wow! Okay. Yeah. Well, that's them. Well, they already are great actors, but even make me more proud of their work because they really make it feel like they cannot see. Yeah.
We had excellent training. Yeah. Wow. It helped all of us, even with all the design, like the props people and myself and the production designer, all of us had to go through this training. And it really helped figuring out when I was creating a costume, what is it that I need to put on this or make this costume feel or sound like so that it tells a story for the character.
Wow, that's very impressive. Then, Natalie, I want to talk to you, besides the costume design, you are involved in such a creative environment and especially those two shows, Handmaid, Tale, and See. Seeing these stories, when we start watching Handmaid Tales, it stressed me a lot. I was so stressed out because the story is great, but then I was stressed out because I was thinking in my head, well, this is not too far from what our reality can be. Yeah. And the same we See. You watch it and you realize, maybe we're going there. You as a person, not as a fashion designer who is hired to design this thing, what is your connection with these stories, and how do you feel about these stories that you work on?
Well, Handmaid was very hard. I was on it for 3 years, and it was a really hard story to live every day. The odd thing was while I was actually doing the series itself, because it's all just get up, go to work, come home, get up, come home. It's a cycle. I wasn't outside much in the world except for buying groceries. So until I had a break and I started to venture out into the world again and listen to people talk and blah, 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 talk to me about the show, you don't notice how intense it is until you've stopped. And it's almost like you're so stressed and wound up from it, and you actually take it home, because you end up living it. But at the same time, sometimes you don't realize how strong it really is until you've cut from it. For example, I didn't, in the third season, until I got to Washington and I sat on a bench and I heard girls passing by to drop off their capes so they could go to lunch. A lot of the girls, they're saying, wow, I can't believe this is so real feeling, it's so intense. That's when it dawned on me that it's like, yeah, this could be happening right now. And it's teetering on a fine edge of possibly still happening. So it's, especially in the United States. I mean, there's other countries that are going through similar things, but yeah.
Oh my God. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for your time. My students are listening, all the students out there and faculty, and of course our general audience, thank you for tuning in. You are the best. WCNY, PBS in Central New York, thank you for the partnership. And Natalie, this is your house anytime. Well, the basement. I invite you to the basement. I promise
You're my office.
Yeah, I promise you, if you come to visit, I will take you out of the basement and go to the
Okay. Fantastic.
Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.